What's up YouTube? Capital G here, checking out the brand new Darklord support that just got revealed coming out of Rise of the Duelist. I guess we now know why the Darklord storyline was continuing on Forbidden Droplets because, surprise, Konami had more legacy support planned in this set. I think the storyline is getting crazy with Darklords because if you look at a couple of the girls that have been added into this archetype, they're the same girls that were on Solemn scolding, so even they have turned against God. Like, man, it's getting crazy. As I've said before, I predict that he's going to come back on our next Solemn card. I think he's going to destroy the entire Darklord archetype, but that's just my prediction. Now, I'll tell you guys up front, I looked at this support last night before I went to sleep. I did not think it was very good, and I don't do, live card reactions, so I was like, well, I'll sleep on it. And I went to Reddit. I was like, maybe people are just seeing stuff that I'm missing out. I went to Facebook, and everyone's saying it's bad, man. They changed the way that Darklords, or they changed the direction of the Darklord archetype. Now, again, I'll of course review these cards and maybe you guys will think different, but let's go ahead and get into it. I'm gonna start with their new boss monster, which again is shockingly a fusion monster. This is Lucifer, Darklord of the Morning Star. So now Lucifer is he's basically in his ultimate form. He's a level 12 Dark Fairy fusion monster, 4,000 attack, 4,000 defense, and he requires 3 Dark Fairy monsters to summon, which basically is it's like all the Darklord monsters. His first effect, his first and third effect are both hard once per turn. First effect says if this card is fusion summoned using Darklord Morningstar as material, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. Second effect, fairy monsters you control cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects. Third effect, during your main phase, quick effect, you can pay 1,000 light points, special summon one fairy monster from your hand or graveyard in defense position. Okay, so I wanted to lead with power, and a lot of you guys might be a little tricked by this. You might be like, oh, come on, Cap, you said these cards were bad, but this guy is really good. And yeah, I think that this card is fine. 3 Darklord monsters might be a little excessive to put into a boss monster, but I can deal with it. This guy has great stats, offense and defense, plus you got a potential one-sided judgment dragon when it's summoned, so I think that that's perfectly fine as well. The fact that he gets targeting protection from anything your opponent throws at it, and he gives that to all your Darklord monsters, is also pretty good. And then basically he should always kind of be a +1, assuming his effect doesn't get negated. He should be a +1 every turn, because you're either going to be monster reborning one of your Darklord monsters from the graveyard, or you can summon one of your Darklord monsters from your hand, or Archlord Christie, or whatever the heck you want to run in Darklords, as long as it's a fairy. So basically he should kind of pay you back every turn as long as you have the life points, and whatever Darklord monster you're bringing back from the graveyard can potentially activate one of the spells and traps for another 1,000 life points, so that can be another plus. I think that this card can recover a lot of advantage, and I think it's a really good boss monster, but the way that you actually have to fusion summon it, I'm not very keen on. So let's go ahead and look at the fusion method that Konami gave us, which of course has to be some weird method. This is Rebellious Darklord. It's a normal trap card because, of course, who doesn't like fusion summoning using trap cards? It's a hard once per turn, and it says send 1 Darklord monster that is in your hand or face up on your field to the graveyard. That is a cost. You cannot get around that. Fusion summon 1 Dark Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand and or field as fusion material. Then gain life points equal to the attack of the monsters sent to the graveyard to activate this card. Okay, I'm not dumb here. I know what Konami is going for. What they want you to do is they want you to fusion summon in the Morningstar, blow up your opponent's board because they probably want you to do it during their turn, then monster reborn one of your monsters with Morningstar, and then hopefully that can just kind of carry you to victory. Your monsters have targeting protection, so that should be good enough. I completely get that, and I'm not even really that mad about the fact that you're fusion summoning using a trap card, despite the fact that historically that's never actually worked. Not from a competitive standpoint. Go look up any fusion deck in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! We've never seen a great fusion deck fusion summoning using trap cards. It just really hasn't worked. My biggest problem with this card is that it has a cost attached to it. If I already have to give up 3 freaking monsters to fusion summon the fusion monster, why do I also have to give up an additional monster just to activate this card? People need to understand this card in the context. If you are activating this card on the field, you are giving up 1, the actual trap to activate itself, 2, the cost, which is another monster, and then 3 more monsters. In case you weren't counting, that's 5 cards to summon your fusion monster. Your entire opening hand is basically spent on this 1 card. If you open with this and 4 monsters, you just have to set this and that's it. That's the only card that you can actually use if you want to play this. Now look, if you activate this card in the graveyard, or if you're activating the effect with like one of your Dark Lord monsters on field, I think you can cushion the blow a little more. But then it kind of begs the question, how are you getting this into the graveyard to begin with, other than Eggshell? That's like the only way I can see you easily getting this card into the graveyard. And now you're relying on one specific monster, and it's not like you're just going to be holding your Eggshell. Eggshell is one of the first cards Dark Lords use, because Dark Lords is just a draw a billion cards in a turn, and hopefully Monster Reborn a billion of your monsters, and kind of win that way. I'm not saying that it can't work. I'm just saying that the investment with this card is just, it's absolutely insane. I mean, this card is basically a neg 4. You can probably recover that neg 4 over like a couple of turns using the fusion monster, but I just don't know if people will give you that, if they'll give you all of that time. Next up is Dark Lord of Pleasure, and yes, this is one of the Solemn Warning girls. She is a level 4 Dark Fairy monster, 1600 attack, 0 defense. Her effect is a hard once per turn. If this card is normal or special summon, you can activate this effect. For the rest of the turn, you cannot activate monster effects except fairy monsters. Also, choose 2 Dark Lord monsters in your hand or deck that have different levels. If you do, special summon one of them to your opponent's field in defense position, and if you do that, add the other one to your hand. Okay, so this is basically like a Stratos for the Dark Lord archetype, with a lot more steps. You are being able to add any Dark Lord monster basically from your deck to your hand, but it does come at the cost of having to give your opponent a monster, and that monster is in defense mode. So if you're going second, you gotta at least run over that monster, and a lot of these Dark Lord monsters do have some big old booties. They got a lot of defense. Now, I guess that you can say, hey Cap, they're trying to set up for Morningstar. You want your opponent to have as many monsters on their side of the field, thus you get to summon more monsters with Morningstar, and that's fine, but you probably have already committed your normal summon to this card at that point, so maybe you might have to Morningstar in the following turn. Honestly, it just, like, I don't really know. I mean, searching Eggshell seems pretty good, and Dark Lords have never really needed their normal summon all that much, but I just don't know if this card is really worth the trouble. Next up is the other Solemn girl. This is Dark Lord of Delight, level 4 Dark Fairy monster, 0 attack, 1600 defense, so basically the opposite of the last girl's stats. You've got a hard once per turn on both of her effects, but you can stack them in the same turn. First effect, during any main phase, you can, and this is a quick effect, immediately after this effect resolves, tribute summon one fairy monster face up. Second effect, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can make all face up monsters your opponent controls lose 500 attack and defense for each fairy monster currently on the field until the end of this turn. So this is clearly like set up for Morningstar. Basically, they want you to normal summon this card and then tribute for Morningstar, which, I mean, that's fine. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that's a legitimate play. If you already have Morningstar in your hand, this gives you the ability to just normal summon, get fodder on field, and then instantly go into the Morningstar. In addition to that, your opponent's monsters start getting progressively weaker. It just feels like now we're making our deck way too focused on Morningstar. Don't get me wrong, Morningstar has always been a strong card, but I've seen Dark Lords win without it, and now it's like this card is based around Morningstar. The fusion monster needs Morningstar to nuke the field. How much are we really going to commit the entire deck to just Morningstar? I know it's supposed to be the boss monster of the deck, but Dark Lords can win without Morningstar quite easily. Our final monster is Dark Lord Nergal. This is a level 8 Dark Fairy monster, 2700 attack, 2500 defense. You can only special summon Dark Lord Nergal once per turn. Your second effect is a hard once per turn, and your first effect says if a fairy monster attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. Second effect is it's basically built into all the Dark Lord big monsters. You can pay 1000 life points, then target a Dark Lord spell or trap in your graveyard, apply that target's effect, then shuffle that target into the deck. Okay, so what is this? I mean, we're in 2020 and Dark Lords are just getting piercing damage. Like, that's supposed to be some great effect. I can kind of see that being useful if you're summoning this card directly from your deck off of Morningstar. Like, that's kind of nice. Your Dark Lords can beat over your opponent's monsters, because the more monsters your opponent has, the more, power your Morningstar has theoretically, because you're summoning more monsters, and that's fine, giving them all piercing. It's just, Wouldn't you have rather just had something better than that, like piercing damage? A lot of times Darklords can just remove the monsters on their opponent's side of the field using the spell and trap effects from the graveyard. I mean, if you summon this from Morningstar, it's good, but other than that, I'm failing to see a reason why I would really want to run more than one copy of this card, and honestly, I don't think that I would ever really want to draw this card either. But those are just my thoughts, guys. Maybe I'm completely off base here. As I said, I read the cards last night. I really didn't like them. I thought the fusion monster was excellent, but the fusion trap was clunky and it was asking way too much of me. I'm not willing to give up 5 cards basically to summon one card that can easily die to a simple Solemn strike, and then I have nothing left to play with. I thought I would like the cards more in the morning, but that didn't happen either. And as I've said, I've read what people have said on Facebook and Reddit, the people who actually play Darklords, and even they're saying these cards aren't very good. I don't know why Konami changed the direction of Darklords so drastically, where the deck is just like Morningstar Turbo, but I don't know, man. I love the lore, though. I think the lore is pretty dope. But whatever you guys think, you leave that in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.